The clock struck 2:47 a.m. when the first crane began to turn over hull 440. The bay's fog swallowed the shipyard lights, but the sound was the same as always: hammers, sparks, tired voices, and the distant echo of the sea. The war wouldn't wait, and neither would Henry Kaiser. On that stretch of American coastline, something unprecedented was about to happen. The whole world was fighting against time, but only one man dared to challenge it head-on. He wasn't an admiral, he wasn't a military engineer. He was a civil contractor with thick glasses and builder's hands, who believed the war could be won with logistics, not heroes. His name, Henry J. Kaiser. Year, 1942. Place, west coast of the United States. The Atlantic was a steel graveyard. German submarines were sinking Allied convoys at a terrifying speed. Every lost freighter meant less fuel, less ammunition, less hope. The United States needed to replace ships faster than the enemy could destroy them. It was a cold calculation: either build en masse or lose the war. But up to that point, building a ship took months. Steel had to be shaped with precision, rivets required skilled artisans, and every part of the hull was made almost by hand. Naval engineers said halving the construction time would already be a miracle. Kaiser promised to reduce it tenfold. 4 days, he said, staring at a room full of incredulous officers. We're going to launch a Liberty ship in 4 days. The silence that followed was awkward. One of the Navy engineers laughed. "Mr. Kaiser, even the East Coast shipyards don't do it in 40 days. Kaiser didn't laugh. He simply replied, calmly, "Then we're looking at the problem wrong. The secret isn't how to build a ship. It's how to organize the work." He didn't see a shipyard like the others. To him, it was an assembly line like those in Detroit, but on water. Kaiser brought methods from civil construction and applied them to the shipbuilding industry. He divided the ship into prefabricated modules, built in separate workshops. He replaced traditional rivets with electric welding, which cut time and required fewer skilled workers. He created 24-hour shifts with precise team rotations and supervisors. And above all, he bet on ordinary people: housewives, students, farm workers. He trained thousands of them at an industrial pace. "I don't want engineers who think like engineers. I want workers who think like problem solvers." The first Liberty ship produced by this method took 230 days. The second, 150. The third, 72. And so, month after month, the time plummeted, until November 1942, when Kaiser decided to do the unthinkable: prove his method could conquer time. The challenge was official. Before the press, the Navy, and a crowd of workers, the Richmond shipyard announced, "We're going to build the SS Robert E. Peary in less than 5 days." It was a mix of bet and spectacle. The world watched. If they failed, the Liberty project would be ridiculed. If they succeeded, it would be a direct message to Hitler: "You have tanks, we have time." Every block of the ship was prepared in advance, like a mechanical symphony. Cranes brought pre-assembled steel sections fitted with minute precision. Welds were done in a choreographed sequence. The docks never slept. Men and women worked under bright lights with cold coffee and radios broadcasting war news from the front. It was a race against the impossible. On the 4th day, before dawn, the last panel was sealed. Hull 440 was ready. The SS Robert E. Peary slid into the sea amid a shower of sparks and applause. Total time, 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. The feat made headlines around the world. The shipyard miracle proved that the United States wasn't fighting just with weapons, but with organization. While the enemy believed in technical supremacy, Kaiser believed in human scale, and on that day, he won. The impossible isn't a matter of time, it's a matter of method. Every miracle has its engineering, and Henry Kaiser's wasn't born from a flash of genius, but from a system thought out, tested, and accelerated to the limit. Back then, shipbuilding was almost a manual art. Even in the full industrial era, shipyards operated like giant workshops. A ship was only assembled after every part was ready, and each phase depended on the previous one. It was a beautiful process, but slow, and slow meant defeated. Henry Kaiser saw in that a deadly sin. Tradition masked inefficiency. He came from civil construction, where impossible deadlines were routine. He had learned something from monumental works like the Hoover Dam and the Grand Coulee. The impossible is conquered when time stops being linear. In a dam, you don't wait to finish the foundation before starting the top. You build on simultaneous fronts. And it was that thinking he brought to the sea. Why wait to finish the keel before starting the superstructure? Let's start everything, all at once, everywhere. Henry Kaiser. Thus was born the concept that would change the war. Modular production. Each Liberty ship was divided into dozens of modules: the deck, the hold, the engine rooms, the side sections. These parts were built in separate workshops, then brought by rails to the main dock. There, the ship assembled itself like a giant metal jigsaw puzzle. It was more than efficiency. It was an industrial choreography. Each team knew the exact minute to act. Every weld, every crane, every delivery obeyed a rhythm. The shipyard stopped being a factory. It became a city organized around time. But there was still the bottleneck of rivets. The traditional method depended on specialized workers and took hours. Kaiser replaced it all with electric welding, a technique many Navy engineers considered dangerous. It'll crack under pressure, they warned. The danger isn't the crack, it's the delay. And he was right. With welding, time plummeted. And more importantly, the work opened up to those who had never set foot in a shipyard. In a few months, thousands of women, the legendary Rosie the Riveters, were welding holes and beams with surgical precision. Trained in weeks, they surpassed the productivity of veterans. A welder isn't born ready, but they learn fast if you teach right. The shipyard became a living machine. But the biggest challenge was still to come: coordination. Kaiser realized that a ship isn't built with steel, it's built with information. He created a centralized control system, almost prophetic for the era. In each workshop, colored cards and charts marked deadlines, batches, and priorities. Data was updated in real time by supervisors, allowing delays to be predicted before they happened. It was the embryo of what decades later the world would call just in time. If a part arrives late, the ship delays. If the welder has no material, the ship delays. The clock is the enemy. We need to conquer it, not just follow it. Henry Kaiser. In the first months, errors were inevitable. Swapped parts, misaligned sections, accidents, fatigue. But Kaiser's genius lay somewhere else. Intelligent repetition. Every error became data. Every datum an improvement. The process evolved in real time, like an organism learning to live. Over time, what had been improvisation became a symphony. When a hull reached the dock, every team already knew what to do. No shouted orders, no confusion, just rhythm, steel, and sweat. It was chaos converted to harmony. They think I'm building ships. I'm building a system. Henry Kaiser. That phrase, noted in his diary, summed it all up. Kaiser wasn't just a builder, he was an architect of organization. While others did materials engineering, he did time engineering. But every acceleration exacts its price. The faster production got, the more pressure fell on the workers. The shipyard was a city that never slept. Women worked pregnant. Men swapped shifts without rest. Accidents were inevitable. Kaiser saw it and tried to compensate. He created 24-hour cafeterias, free transportation, rest areas, and soon something that would change the world of work forever. His own medical system, right inside the shipyards. But that's a story for later. For now, the priority was one: beat the clock. Every minute here is one less minute of hunger in London, one more minute of fuel in Moscow. Henry J. Kaiser. And so, with relentless logic and a stubborn heart, Henry Kaiser proved that the impossible could be planned. While one Liberty left the Richmond docks, dozens more cut through the ocean, thousands of tons of American steel defying the silence of the U-boats. But this isn't just a story of steel, it's a story of mindset. Henry Kaiser knew that the greatest enemy of modern war didn't wear a uniform. It wasn't on the front lines. It was in the spreadsheets, the schedules, the way work itself was thought about. For him, the battlefield of World War II extended to the factories, and whoever mastered the rhythm of production would master the future. Germany believed in technical perfection. Every plane, every tank, every submarine was a jewel of engineering. The problem? Perfection is slow, and too slow for total war. The United States chose the opposite path: brute redundancy. Simple ships, robust engines, average materials, but in absurd quantities. While Germany produced 1,000 submarines in 5 years, America launched 2,700 Liberty ships in just 3. It was the triumph of scale over refinement, of logistics over aesthetics, of the factory mindset over artisanal pride. We're not here to make the best ship in the world. We're here to make the right ship, fast enough to win. Henry J. Kaiser. The phrase became a mantra on shipyard murals, bulletin boards, quick coffee breaks. The Liberty ship might be ugly, slow, and noisy, but it was reliable, and it could be repaired at sea with a simple improvised weld. If one sank, another identical one left the dock days later. It was a war of replacement, a war of endurance. Cut to a staged meeting. Navy engineers talk with Kaiser. But Mr. Kaiser, these ships are disposable. Then that's what we'll do. The Germans build relics. We build multipliers. That philosophical difference was the heart of industrial war. On one side, pride in the perfect machine. On the other, faith in the sufficient machine. And behind it all, something even deeper: belief in human adaptability. Kaiser didn't seek isolated geniuses. He sought armies of problem solvers. Ordinary people capable of learning, erring, and trying again, faster than the enemy could react. His genius wasn't in the tools, but in turning work into collective intelligence. In Richmond shipyards, Kaiser implemented what many called a state within a state. Daycares, 24-hour restaurants, collective transportation, and even free medical care in the midst of war. It wasn't kindness, it was strategy. Productivity is cared for people, Kaiser repeated, and he was right. With families supported, focus increased, turnover plummeted, and collective spirit grew, almost as if the whole city breathed to the rhythm of the steel it shaped. Every shift change was a baton pass between generations, genders, and stories. Men and women, young and old, black and white, all in the same uniform, the same fatigue, and the same purpose: beat time. Work stopped being just necessity. It became patriotism. It became faith. Kaiser transformed ordinary labor into silent heroism. Every Liberty launched from Richmond carried more than cargo. It carried a nation's philosophy. The Liberty ship was the portrait of America at war. Imperfect, noisy, stubborn, but unstoppable. And it was also a message to the enemies. No matter how much you destroy, we'll build faster than you can sink. Between 1941 and 1945, 2,710 Liberty ships were launched, millions of tons of supplies, and the average construction time, which had exceeded 200 days per ship, fell to about 42 days per ship. In Kaiser's shipyards, many were completed in less than a week. The numbers weren't just impressive, they were symbolic. They said, in steel and welds, the impossible now had a schedule. The war wasn't won in the trenches. It was won on the night shift. Henry J. Kaiser. The phrase, said years later, summed up the philosophy of a man who saw in common sweat the fuel of victory. But every revolution has its cost, and Henry Kaiser was about to discover the price of accelerating time. If stories like this fascinate you, stories where the impossible becomes method, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. In the next chapter, you'll learn the real price of the miracle, the human and invisible side of the war Kaiser waged against the clock. For months, the world looked at Henry Kaiser's shipyards as the pulsing heart of American victory. But within those walls of steel and smoke, the clock exacted every second he had stolen from the impossible. The work shifts were endless, day and night without breaks. Gray-haired men slept on beams wrapped in canvas blankets. Women left their children's cradles to don overalls and welding masks. 17-year-olds lied about their age to get a badge. The noise never stopped. Hammers, cranes, whistles. The metallic sound of modern war. And yet, no one complained, because Kaiser had turned work into an act of faith. But the human body doesn't keep up with the rhythm of machines. Soon came the first collapses, faintings, crane accidents, severe burns, and a statistic Kaiser didn't like to repeat. For every Liberty launched, another worker was injured. In official reports, they were just numbers. But every number had a face and someone waiting at home. Kaiser, pragmatic to the bone, saw it as a paradox. He had beaten time, but time was beating his people. He decided to react the only way he knew, by organizing even more. He created the first corporate health system in the United States, the Kaiser Permanente. Hospitals inside the shipyards, free care, doctors and nurses on 24-hour duty. For the era, it was revolutionary, but also a cruel reminder. Extreme productivity demands human maintenance. Caring for the worker isn't charity, it's equipment maintenance. Note in Henry Kaiser's diary, 1943. The numbers didn't lie. Yes, the pace was record-breaking. Yes, the Liberties were saving convoys and supplying battlefronts. But the price was an army of the exhausted, men and women consumed by the same clock they had helped defeat. And there was another silent enemy, waste. Under constant pressure, errors grew. Poor welds, misaligned plates, structural cracks. Some ships needed repairs right after launch. Others broke at sea, victims of steel fatigue and haste. The press began calling them broken ships. In truth, it was the steel becoming brittle in freezing temperatures. But the symbolism was inevitable. The miracle was starting to crack. And yet, Kaiser's order was the same. Keep going. Another record in Richmond. Henry Kaiser shipyard launches its 200th Liberty ship. Behind the headlines, Kaiser knew the real weight of the achievement. Every launch was a new burden. He had promised the impossible, and now he was a hostage to his own miracle. Success is the enemy of rest. Henry Kaiser's diary, January 1944. The war was already shifting course. The Allies were gaining ground, but inside Kaiser, pride mixed with exhaustion. The man who had turned chaos into synchronicity now saw his creation become a machine that couldn't stop. He called it the trap of efficiency. The faster you produce, the less time you have to think. Marginal note on one of his internal memos. What had started as liberation from chaos was becoming a prison of rhythm. Kaiser looked at the SS Robert E. Peary, the ship that symbolized his triumph, and now saw something different, a monument to speed and to the human cost of haste. Behind the smiles, there were sleepless nights, burns, tears. But there was also pride. Those workers knew what they were doing. Every Liberty launched meant supplied convoys, saved cities, protected lives. It was that duality Kaiser carried in his chest. The weight of sacrifice and the glory of necessity. "Mr. Kaiser, we've done the impossible. Maybe we should slow down." Slow down when the boys are still dying in the Atlantic. The silence that followed was heavy. It was impossible to argue with the urgency of war. But inside, Kaiser knew. The clock he had defeated now held him prisoner. The greatness and tragedy of Henry Kaiser were in the same equation. He proved the impossible could be done, but not without cost. And that cost wasn't measured in dollars or steel. It was measured in lives, in wear and tear, in a lesson the world would only understand years later. Productivity without purpose is just another form of destruction. When the sirens finally fell silent and the engines shut off, the shipyard noise gave way to a sound no one there remembered, the sound of the wind. It was 1945. The world breathed, exhausted, before the end of history's most devastating war. In the ports of California, Oregon, and Washington, hundreds of ships rested side by side, ready but aimless. The urgency had ceased, and with it, so did the steel empire Henry Kaiser had raised against the clock. The miracle had fulfilled its role. Now remained the silence and the bill for what it all meant. Between 1941 and 1945, Kaiser's shipyards launched hundreds of Liberty ships, nearly a third of the entire American fleet. The average construction time, which had exceeded 200 days, fell to about 42 days. At the height of the war, some were launched in less than a week. These numbers weren't just statistics. They were the mathematical translation of a simple and powerful idea. Organization is a form of courage. Henry Kaiser didn't win medals. He didn't lead armies. But his ships carried what sustained the Allies. Wheat to England, tanks to Normandy, fuel to Russia, and perhaps most importantly, hope floating over the ocean. Generals win battles, but wars are won by factories. Henry J. Kaiser, 1946. The Liberties weren't beautiful, they weren't fast, but they were reliable. And above all, they represented a new way of thinking. Victory no longer depended on the strongest soldier, but on the most efficient system. That philosophy would become the foundation of the 20th century. Decades later, the same principle would guide the automotive industry, NASA's assembly lines, and the modern concept of mass production. It all started there, with a civilian in a suit and a stopwatch in hand. But Henry Kaiser's deepest legacy wasn't in the steel. It was in the people. In Richmond's shipyards, Kaiser built more than ships. He built a miniature society. For the first time, women, immigrants, African Americans, and the elderly worked side by side on a national scale. They didn't just produce ships, they produced belonging. Many historians see in this the embryo of the post-war equality and integration movement. Industry, which had always been the territory of a few, became the space of all. I didn't teach the country to build ships. I taught the country to work as one organism. Henry J. Kaiser. After the war's end, Kaiser returned to what he loved most: building. He erected highways, factories, housing, and expanded the medical system born in his shipyards, the Kaiser Permanente, today one of the largest health systems in the United States. It was his way of continuing to apply the same philosophy: organization, humanity, and method. If you organize work well, there's time left to care for people. Henry J. Kaiser. That vessel, built in 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes, was never the fastest or most powerful. But it was the most symbolic. It was a civilian's answer to the brutality of war. A reminder that human intellect, when guided by purpose, can bend time and save the world with welds and courage. The Peary sailed the Atlantic dozens of times and survived the war. Years later, it was scrapped. But the legend of the 4-day ship became eternal. In the end, Henry Kaiser didn't build ships, he built time. And in times of war, time is life. It started with a civilian and a clock, and ended with a steel empire that saved the world from scarcity. The clock stopped, but the legacy continues. In every factory, every system, every mind that understands the impossible just needs a method. And you? Have you ever stopped to think how many revolutions happen away from the spotlight? In factories, on assembly lines, in minds that dare to challenge time? If stories like this inspire you, stories where ingenuity and humanity walk hand in hand, subscribe to the channel. Here, every video is a journey to the past to understand the present. Because some victories aren't born in the trenches, but in the hands of those who turn the impossible into routine. Turn on the bell. The next historical miracle is already being built.